Welcome to The Test is History, an intricate insight into Test cricket's delightfully distinctive diversions. This episode focuses on Test number 119, the fourth Test of the 1911-12 Ashes series between Australia and England, which took place at Melbourne Cricket Ground from the 9th to the 13th of February 1912. The selection of players to comprise the Test teams of England and Australia has complex histories. At the administrative helm for England at the turn of the century was Lord Hawke, a cricketing colossus who was President of Yorkshire for 40 years. In 1899, after his proposal that an MCC-initiated Central Selection Committee should pick the England team was adopted, Hawke became the inaugural chairman of selectors. Lord Hawke was resolute in his view that no professional should ever captain England. Perhaps his prejudice stemmed from the Yorkshire team he inherited as a young captain back in 1882, which was famously known for its insobriety and sometimes described as 10 drunks and a parson. Hawke successfully eradicated the drink problem at Yorkshire as the gentleman captain of a successful team which included committed model professionals such as George Hurst, Wilfred Rhodes and Schofield Haig. But he would retain his view that professionals required the paternalistic leadership of a strong amateur for the rest of his life. However, a captain's amateur status did not guarantee harmony with Lord Hawke. The England captaincy of Archie McLaren through much of the first decade of the 20th century was laden with quarrels. This led the way to the promotion of the relatively inexperienced but undoubtedly diplomatic Pelham Warner of Middlesex as England captain for the successful Ashes tour of 1903-04. The tactful and trusted ambassadorial skills of Plum Warner were again called upon when England looked for a captain to lead the 1911-12 Ashes tour. The initial system for an Australian touring team was that the players, financed by Melbourne Cricket Club, would appoint their own manager and captain and would manage their own affairs, sharing the tour profits between them. But in 1905, the Australian Board of Control was formed, and one of the first things it wanted to control was the financial arrangements. To this end, the board appointed Peter McAlister as treasurer for the 1909 tour of England. McAlister was also made vice-captain ahead of star batsman Victor Trumper. It was an unpopular appointment. McAlister clashed with the players as well as tour manager Frank Laver, who had been retained as the player's choice. With another tour on the horizon in 1912, the board refused to reappoint Laver, leading to a rebellion amongst the senior players. Ominously for the players, McAlister was now appointed to the board of selectors. At this point, the board also took charge of selecting the team captain. The choice of Clem Hill was uncontroversial among the team, but Hill would soon find himself at odds with fellow selectors McAlister and Frank Iredale. England selected 16 players for the 1911-12 tour. Accompanying Captain Warner were specialist batsmen Jack Hobbs of Surrey, George Gunn of Nottinghamshire, Phil Mead of Hampshire and Sepp Kinnear of Warwickshire. The squad boasted a number of all-rounders: Wilfred Rhodes of Yorkshire, Frank Woolley of Kent, Joe Vine of Sussex, Johnny Douglas of Essex, young Jack Hearn of Middlesex, James Iremonger of Nottinghamshire and Frank Foster of Warwickshire. The wicket-keepers were Herbert Strudwick of Surrey and Tiger Smith of Warwickshire. Specialist bowlers were Bill Hitch of Surrey and Sidney Barnes. Barnes' journey to England selection was unique. Despite a successful start to his Test career a decade earlier, he spent 5 years in the wilderness from 1902 to 1907. At this point, Barnes had given up first-class cricket, opting for better pay and shorter hours in league and minor counties cricket, where he was able to combine his clerical job using his copperplate handwriting to copy and engross legal documents. Barnes had a special bowling talent. A tall, lean man who ran in from a springy 9-paced run-up, He bowled with a high arm action, giving an awkward lift off the pitch. His large hands enabled him to bowl off-spin, leg spin, fast spin, cutters, in-swingers and out-swingers with variations of pace. He even had a delivery named after him, the Barnes ball. It came from outside the crease swinging in before breaking back from leg towards the off stump. It was delivered at pace, perfectly disguised without rotation of the wrist, but purely through the twist of his spidery fingers. Even from the confines of league cricket, his talents could not be ignored by England, and he was recalled for the 1907-8 tour of Australia. But despite his undoubted prowess, even by 1911, the temperamental Barnes was still not an automatic choice for the Test team, and he had yet to be part of an Ashes winning campaign. This was in no small part due to his reputation as a difficult personality. To quote Neville Cardus, "A chill wind of antagonism blew from him on the sunniest day." The series did not start according to plan. After just one tour game, Plum Warner fell ill with ulcer trouble. Johnny Douglas took over the captaincy duties. In the first Test at Sydney, Douglas chose to open the bowling alongside Warwickshire's Frank Foster, leaving Sydney Barnes as first change. Barnes was an early exponent of swing bowling. He had developed these skills on his first tour to Australia in 1901-02 through watching his Australian counterpart Monty Noble, whose previous experience as a baseball pitcher had given him knowledge of flighting the ball. The tall, lean and supple Barnes was particularly effective at swinging the new ball, and being denied this role offended his volatile character. His subsequent bowling performance was below par, and thanks to a typically fluent century from Australia's Victor Trumper and 12 wickets from their leg spinner Ranji Horden, England lost the opening Test by 146 runs. Between the first and second Test, England had time for reflection. From his Sydney nursing home, Plum Warner held a meeting with senior players, including a discussion on whether Douglas should be replaced as captain. Jack Hobbs spoke in favour of Douglas, a cricketer who he admired, putting the view that a change of captaincy would be detrimental to team spirit. Douglas simultaneously consulted Hobbs, Wilfred Rhodes and Herbert Strudwick over what they considered had gone wrong. He heeded their advice that Sydney Barnes should open the bowling. He also took on board Frank Foster's view that Foster's Warwickshire teammate, Tiger Smith, should replace Strudwick as wicket-keeper. The 22-year-old amateur Foster, a left-arm fast-medium paced bowler, was a pioneer of leg theory, bowling to a predominantly leg-sided field, usually from round the wicket. At Warwickshire, Tiger Smith had extensive experience of keeping to Foster's leg-sided deliveries, paving the way to county championship success in 1911. The changes led to a turnaround in England's fortunes. Barnes and Foster took 15 wickets between them in the second Test at Melbourne, which England won by 8 wickets. The Australian reaction to defeat was to prove far more fractious. The growing chasm between the Australian Board of Control and the team was about to reach boiling point. Wranglings over financial arrangements began to traverse into selection matters. Relations between captain Clem Hill and selector Peter McAlister were already fraught when Hill requested a left-arm bowler, preferably Charlie McCartney, for Adelaide in place of McAlister's favourite Roy Minette. McAlister responded via telegram, suggesting that Hill should drop himself, an incredible proposition considering Hill's status as the most prolific run scorer in Test history. The majority of Hill's teammates backed their skipper at a subsequent meeting, but McAlister got his way and Minette, not McCartney, played at Adelaide. The Australian bowling attack was ineffectual in the face of a magnificent century by Jack Hobbs, and despite a second innings 98 from Hill, Australia fell to a 7-wicket defeat, with England's bowling spearheads, Sydney Barnes and Frank Foster, sharing 14 wickets. Defeat at Adelaide put Australia 2-1 behind in the series and meant that tensions would only escalate. On the 3rd of February, less than a week before the 4th test, the selection committee met. Clem Hill and Peter McAlister confronted one another face to face and exchanged insults. Hill claimed McAlister was no judge of cricket. McAlister responded that Hill was the worst captain in living memory. Hill stood up and stated, "You've been asking for a punch all night." A physical fight ensued, culminating with Hill punching McAlister on the jaw, leaving him bloodied on the floor, and announcing that he could no longer work with him. Hill put his resignation as a selector in writing, which the board accepted. England, ahead in the series, went back to Melbourne, knowing that victory against this divided team would secure the Ashes. Australia lined up as follows. 2 all-rounders, Charles Kellaway and Ranji Horden, were to open the first innings. Stylish left-hander Warren Bardsley completed the top order with the legendary Victor Trumper, the highest run scorer of 1911, in at 4. Despite the selection meeting brawl, Clem Hill was retained as player and captain, coming in at 5. Experienced all-rounder Warwick Armstrong was to come in at 6. The services of Roy Minette were retained at 7. Skillful left-hander Vernon Ransford was down at 8. Tough leg spinner Jimmy Matthews came in at 9. Fast bowler Tibby Cotter was in at 10. And wicket-keeper Sammy Carter, last man in at 11. The England team for the test match comprised Jack Hobbs and Wilfred Rhodes as opening batsmen, Nottinghamshire's George Gunn at number 3, and young Jack Hearn, Plum Warner's Middlesex teammate and godson, at 4. All-rounder Frank Foster was in at 5, stand-in skipper Johnny Douglas at 6, 2 prolific left-handers, Kent's Frank Woolley and Hampshire's Phil Mead at 7 and 8. Sussex leg-spinning all-rounder Joe Vine made his debut at 9. Wicket-keeper Tiger Smith in at 10, and Sydney Barnes making up the tail. After a heatwave which lasted for weeks, a huge thunderstorm engulfed Victoria prior to the test. Heavy rain had made the wickets soft, but England's skipper Douglas was still unsure of what to do if he won the toss. He consulted Plum Warner, who was equally uncertain. "Better ask Wilfred," responded Warner, and so Douglas sought the opinion of senior professional Wilfred Rhodes. The 3 men walked out to the middle, and Rhodes pressed his thumb against the turf, feeling moisture. "Put them in," said Rhodes. It was a gamble, as there was little precedent for a side opting to field first being successful in Test cricket, but the 2 amateurs went along with Rhodes' suggestion. So, on winning the toss, England captain Johnny Douglas put Australia into bat. However, openers Charles Kellaway and Ranji Horden took the score past 50. It was an anxious time for England. Johnny Douglas made a change of bowling, bringing on the slow left-armer Frank Woolley. Woolley made the breakthrough, removing Kellaway, who gave a catch to Hearn. Immediately afterwards, Sydney Barnes had his first scalp, bowling Ranji Horden for 19. Victor Trumper joined Warren Bardsley at the crease and tried to keep the score moving. Bardsley scratched around, but had still not scored when Foster bowled him for an 8-ball duck. Clem Hill came to the crease. He had lost the support of the Australian Board of Control, but not of the crowd, who gave 3 cheers to the Australian captain. But 5 runs later, Trumper was gone, also bowled by Foster for 17. It was 74 for 4. Warwick Armstrong became the next Australian batsman to have his stumps removed, becoming Barnes' second victim, out for 7, leaving Australia on 83 for 5. Skipper Clem Hill and Roy Minette began something of a fight back for Australia, taking the score past 100. But then young Jack Hearn had his second catch, snaring Clem Hill off the bowling of Barnes to leave Australia on 124 for 6. Vernon Ransford came in and helped Minette take the score past 150 before he was caught by Wilfred Rhodes off the bowling of Frank Foster. Minette, who had hit out with some success, passed his 50, but then went in exactly the same way. Australia were 165 for 8. Barnes then took the wicket of Jimmy Matthews, caught by George Gunn for 3, leaving Australia on 170 for 9. The Australian tail wagged with a 21-run last wicket stand between Cotter and Carter before Sydney Barnes achieved his 5-wicket haul. He bowled Cotter for 15 to end the Australian innings on 191 all outs. The day had belonged to Barnes and Foster, who had taken 9 wickets between them. England's openers, Jack Hobbs and Wilfred Rhodes, went into bat to negotiate the remains of the day. Both were from humble origins, but beyond that their journeys to opening the batting for England bore little in comparison. Born and raised in Cambridge, Hobbs had to wait to qualify to represent a first-class county, in his case Surrey. Nevertheless, his quality as an opening batter was apparent from his first-class debut when he made 88 for Surrey against a Gentlemen of England side captained by W.G. Grace in 1905. His late start meant he was 25 before he made his debut for England, where his first innings 83 helped steer England to a single-wicket victory against Australia in Melbourne in 1908. From there on, Jack Hobbs' status as the master batsman was rarely in doubt. In contrast, Rhodes, born in the cricketing hotbed of Yorkshire, immediately qualified for his county and made his debut for England in 1899 at the age of 21. His role for county and country was initially very different. Rhodes was a left-arm spinner who became the most significant link in a long chain of Yorkshire and England's slow left-armers, which included Ted Peat and Bobby Peel before him, Hedsley Verity and Johnny Wardle later. His captain at Yorkshire, Lord Hawke, had expressly forbid him from concentrating on batting lest it reduced his effectiveness as a bowler. But few cricketers can claim to be as resourceful as Wilfred Rhodes, and after starting as a tail-ender, he worked his way up the batting order. In 1909, with Colin Blythe in the England team as the specialist slow left-arm bowler, Rhodes was being selected primarily for his batting. In 1910 in South Africa, he was picked to open the innings alongside Hobbs. Rhodes' toughness and savvy made him the perfect foil for Hobbs' stroke-making genius, and they developed a successful record as opening partners, most notably with a 221-run stand at Cape Town. By the 1911-12 tour, they had established themselves as England's first-choice opening pair. Opening the bowling for Australia was Albert "Tibby" Cotter. Although only 5 foot 8 inches tall in height, Cotter generated great pace from his powerful chest and shoulders. Hobbs would later describe him as the quickest bowler he'd ever faced, and it is believed he shattered the stumps at least 20 times during his career. Cotter had a fine record in Test cricket, but the wicket now seemed much easier for batting. Hobbs and Rhodes successfully negotiated the threat of Cotter and brought up England's 50, making 30 and 23 respectively by the close of play. By Saturday the 10th of February 1912, a clear blue sky signalled favourable batting conditions. It was to become an historic day for Hobbs, Rhodes and England. The differing batting styles of Hobbs and Rhodes mirrored their personalities. Hobbs, a popular kind-hearted man of a naturally sunny disposition, batted with loose-shouldered elegance and fluidity. The batting of Rhodes, an introvert who thought deeply about the game, was characterised by defensive caution, self-discipline and a steadfast refusal to indulge in unnecessary elaboration. But for all their outward contrasts, the duo shared an unyielding professional commitment, and their mutual trust was evident in their almost telepathic running between the wickets. Hobbs batted with his usual fluency, dominating the attack, On this occasion, Rhodes was batting with an unusually heavy bat lent to him by George Gunn after Rhodes had split his own bat practicing in the nets. On a faster wicket, he soon found that his usual defensive pushes were going for significant runs. They passed 100, and the Australian target of 191 was within their sights before the luncheon interval. Intelligent shot selection and slick running between the wickets ensured that Australia struggled to contain them, despite changing field placements. With cunning and skill, Hobbs and Rhodes avoided the best Australian fielders, Trumper and Ransford, targeting the weaker Horden's left hand at point. 6 Australian bowlers were tried, to no avail. With the score at 164, Hobbs reached his 100, and an hour later, just before tea, the increasingly free-scoring Rhodes joined him on 3 figures to record his first Test match century. By now, the score had passed 200. When they passed 221, they had broken their own record for England's highest partnership in Tests. They then surpassed Clem Hill and Roger Hartigan's 243 runs to become the highest partnership for any wicket in Tests. In 4.5 hours at the crease, they made an opening stand of 323. Hobbs and Rhodes created a record for the first wicket which would remain for 36 years, when fellow Englishmen Len Houghton and Cyril Washbrook surpassed it in 1948 against South Africa. It remained an Ashes record for 77 years, with Australian opening pair Geoff Marsh and Mark Taylor finally overhauling it in 1989. The Australian attack was rendered ineffectual by the magnificent centuries of Hobbs and Rhodes. Tibby Cotter's 37 wicketless overs in the Melbourne heat proved to be his final act as a Test bowler. He would sadly perish in the First World War, shot by a sniper. Hobbs scored 22 fours, many with square cuts, for his marvellous 178, before he finally departed, snicking a Ranji Horden leg break to Sammy Carter half an hour after tea. It was fitting that Horden, a dentist by profession, should be the one to extract Hobbs. Unusually for a googly bowler, Horden retained accuracy and a fine length with carefully disguised spin, and Hobbs considered him to be the best of the Australian bowlers. He certainly was the most successful in this series, with 32 wickets. It was to be the only wicket of a long day in the field for Australia. Rhodes was joined by the bold and unpredictable Nottinghamshire batsman George Gunn, whose wry smile as he approached the wicket suggested a batsman in no mood to give his opponents a reprieve. Play closed with England on 370 for 179 runs ahead, and the tireless Rhodes unbeaten on 157. The rest day must have been welcomed by the Australian team. In fact, Rhodes was equally relieved to have a day off to recover. Play resumed on Monday with Rhodes and Gunn taking England past 400. Rhodes, the consummate professional, managed to surpass Hobbs' score by 1 run before being caught by Carter off a wide ball by Roy Minette. He had batted for nearly 7 hours. Young Jack Hearn's long wait to bat concluded with a short innings as Minette removed him for a duck caught by Warwick Armstrong. Frank Foster joined George Gunn at the crease. Primarily remembered for his skills as a fine left-arm fast-medium bowler, Foster was also a big-hitting batsman whose career record included a triple century. Alongside George Gunn, he put another 50 on the scorecard. Gunn fell to a catch from Hill off the bowling of Armstrong for 75. Captain Douglas then became the second batsman to fall for a duck, caught by Bardsley, also off Armstrong. In came the elegant Kentish left-hander Frank Woolley. A tall man, Woolley's extensive reach enabled him to adjust to the length of a ball with little movement. He had a fine repertoire of strokes, played with famously leisurely ease, and along with Foster steered England past 500. Foster had made his 50 when he fell to a catch by Horden off the bowling of Armstrong. Woolley was joined by fellow left-hander Phil Mead, and the scoring continued. England had reached 565 when Woolley was caught by Kellaway off Minette for 56. Phil Meade fell for 21 when Horden bowled him. Charles Kellaway removed Tiger Smith for 7, with Jimmy Matthews taking the catch, and Clem Hill caught Sydney Barnes off Horden for 0 to close England's innings on a mammoth 589 all out. England had achieved the highest total in Test match history. This meant Australia were now 398 runs from avoiding an innings defeat. There was just time for them to start their innings, with Sammy Carter opening alongside Kellaway. They managed 8 runs before close of play without loss, but worryingly for Australia, it rained again in the night, freshening the wickets. The following day, only 4 more runs had been added when Barnes removed Kellaway, caught behind by Tiger Smith. For the second time in the match, Warren Bardsley was bowled by Foster, this time for 3, leaving Australia on 20 for 2. Sammy Carter was joined by Victor Trumper, and they put up some resistance, making a 50 stand. By this point, skipper Johnny Douglas had joined the attack, and he removed Carter, caught by Hearn for 38. It was 76 for 3. Then Barnes took the crucial wicket, bowling Victor Trumper for 28. Australia were 86 for 4, and for England, the Ashes were in sight. Warwick Armstrong joined Clem Hill in the middle. They brought up the 100, but no sooner had this happened when Armstrong was bowled by Douglas for 11. Hill followed the same way for the same score, leaving Australia on 112 for 6. Then Roy Minette became the third Australian to be bowled by Douglas, falling for 7, leaving Australia on 117 for 7. Despite the innings defeat looking inevitable, Vernon Ransford was batting gamely and was joined by Tibby Cotter. Cotter made 8 before he was caught by Phil Meade off Frank Foster. Jimmy Matthews resisted, scoring 10 before Foster bowled him out. And then Foster caught Horden off the bowling of Douglas for 5 to leave Australia on 173 all out. Skipper Douglas had plenty of reason to celebrate. His 5th wicket of the innings had won the match and the Ashes for England. In the Melbourne Pavilion, defeated Australian skipper Clem Hill made a generous speech, singling out the batting of Hobbs as the key factor in England's regaining of the Ashes. The England players returned to their hotel to a 7-course banquet with dishes named in honour of the players, including saddle woolly lamb, hobbled asparagus and ashes on toast. England would go on to win the final test in Sydney to complete a 4-1 series victory. The tour was a great triumph for Hobbs, who scored 662 runs at an average of 82.75, as well as Rhodes, who also scored heavily. Of the bowlers, Barnes and Foster led the way with 66 wickets between them. Barnes was now considered the world's undisputed leading bowler and would continue to cement his reputation with stellar performances against Australia and South Africa. But while Foster enjoyed success in the short term, his career was ended prematurely by a motorcycle accident in 1915. His life after cricket was littered with controversy, and he would end his days in a psychiatric hospital. For Australia, the dispute between the Board of Control meant that 6 senior players, Clem Hill, Victor Trumper, Warwick Armstrong, Vernon Ransford, Sammy Carter and Tibby Cotter, refused to partake in the 1912 tour to England for the triangular tournament between Australia, England and South Africa, which the England team subsequently dominated. The 1911-12 series proved to be the last time Hill, Trumper, Ransford and Cotter represented Australia. International events would soon overtake cricketing matters. Among the millions who died in the First World War were several international cricketers, including Australian paceman Tibby Cotter and England's great slow left armer Colin Blythe. It would be 9 years before an England team played in Australia again.